She never thought it would end like this. Standing in the driveway of a house that used to echo with laughter, now locked behind someone else's name. Nora had once believed in forever. In Sunday mornings filled with coffee and soft jazz. In shared glances across crowded rooms. In the quiet strength of love that stays, even when the fire fades. But love didn't stay. Samuel didn't stay. And the most haunting part? He left with everything. The furniture, the memories, the home. All she got was silence. It started slowly, as most endings do. At first, it was the mist, calls. Then the distant eyes across the dinner table. Words became short, touches, mechanical. And the warmth, that comforting hum of knowing someone's got your back. It faded into cold space between them. They had built a life in Montana. A quiet, rugged life. Wide skies, red barns, the smell of pine and snowfall. It felt safe. But safety, Nora learned, can be an illusion. Samuel used to bring her wildflowers from the trails behind their house. Used to hold her hand while they watched the stars. Used to laugh with her, like nothing else in the world mattered. Then, he stopped. There was no affair, no secret, just something crueler. Disinterest. When she asked him one night if he still loved her, his silence was louder than any betrayal. She filed for divorce. She thought it would bring closure, maybe even relief. Instead, it brought courtrooms, arguments, and papers filled with small print and cold intentions. Samuel didn't fight for their marriage, but he fought for the house. Oh, how he fought for that house. The place where they once danced barefoot in the kitchen, now just a legal asset to be won. He took it, all of it. Left her with a single box of belongings and a bank account too empty for the years she gave him. But Nora didn't scream. Didn't beg. She stood tall, even as her world shrank to the size of a borrowed guest room and a worn-out suitcase. Because somewhere deep down, beneath the heartbreak and the hollowed-out hope, she remembered something. She was more than what he left behind. Still. Nights were the hardest. She'd lie awake, wondering, did he ever miss her? Did he ever look around that house and hear her voice in the walls? Did he remember the way she laughed, or the way she cried when he forgot their anniversary? She'll never know. After the divorce, Samuel disappeared like mist under morning sun. No calls, no letters, not even a goodbye worth holding on to. She watched the seasons change alone. Winter came, bitter and long. Spring followed, slow and unfamiliar. And yet, in that loneliness, something began to bloom. Not hope, not yet, but something softer, something quieter. Acceptance. Nora didn't have a house anymore, but she had herself. She walked the same trails where Samuel once picked her flowers. Alone, yes, but breathing, moving. She laughed again. Once, then twice, then more often. She found joy in tiny things. The smell of rain on the porch of a rented cabin. The way her tea steamed in the early morning light. The pages of old books she once didn't have time to read. She still missed him. Sometimes. Not him. Now. But the him she fell in love with. But even that began to fade, like old photographs in the sun. Because one day, she looked in the mirror, and she didn't see heartbreak anymore. She saw a woman who had survived the storm. And wasn't that something? The silence in her new apartment was different. Not the peaceful kind that comes with rest, but the hollow kind. The kind that echoed when she set down her keys or laughed at a joke only she heard. She had never lived alone before. Not, really, not since college. Now even the creak of the floorboards felt like a stranger introducing itself. She rented a small place just outside Bozeman. 1 bedroom, a couch she bought secondhand, curtains she hemmed herself. It wasn't much, but it was hers. There were no framed wedding photos on the mantel, no shared toothbrush by the sink, no mug labeled his. It was a clean slate, which, oddly, hurt more than the mess she'd left behind. At night, she'd stare out the window at the distant mountains, those same peaks she once watched with Samuel from their old back porch. Funny how you can lose someone and still see their shadow everywhere. She'd walk to the local bookstore just to be around voices. She wasn't lonely, exactly. She just missed being known. There was a woman named Pam at the corner cafe who started saving her a blueberry scone every Tuesday. A man at the farmer's market who told terrible jokes and made her smile without trying. These people didn't know her story, didn't know the chapters she'd torn from her life. And maybe that was a kind of grace. She didn't talk about Samuel, didn't say his name out loud. Not because it hurt, but because it no longer needed to be said. But sometimes, in the quiet, she'd remember the little things. How he used to sing along to the radio in the car. How he never let her carry heavy bags. How he once kissed her in the rain and said, "I want to grow old with you." And she'd wonder, what changed? Months passed. She found a rhythm. Not joy. Not yet. But a rhythm. She got a job at a local nonprofit, helping women start over after divorce or domestic hardship. It was ironic, really. She too was starting over. Still figuring out how to rearrange her heart into something that didn't ache when touched. But as she listened to the stories of others, of violence, betrayal, survival, her own pain started to feel shared. Not smaller. Just less lonely. She met a woman named Teresa, late 40s, sharp eyes, a laugh like broken glass. Teresa had lost everything in her own divorce, and yet, she stood tall. People think healing means you stop feeling, she once told Nora. But healing just means the pain stops controlling you. Those words, they stayed with her. And slowly, Nora began to take her life back. She repainted the walls of her apartment a soft green. She learned how to make bread, burnt the first 3 tries, then nailed it. She went on a hike alone, for the first time, without fear. She didn't miss Samuel anymore. What she missed was the version of herself who had believed that love was permanent, the girl who thought good people always stayed, who thought giving your all meant you'd never be left behind. But life doesn't work that way. Sometimes people change. Sometimes they just stop trying. And sometimes they take the house and never look back. And yet, one afternoon, Nora stood at the edge of Flathead Lake. The wind brushed her face like an old friend. And for the first time in what felt like years, she felt still, not waiting, not grieving, not hoping, just still. And in that stillness, she finally understood something. Samuel didn't take everything, because she was still here. There's something about late autumn in Montana. The trees hold on to their last golden leaves, trembling in the wind, not quite ready to let go. Much like Nora. By now, a full year had passed since the divorce was finalized. People told her time would heal. But time doesn't do the healing. People do. Time just gives you the space, if you're brave enough to stand inside it. And she was. Every day she woke up and chose to keep going. Not because she had to, but because a small, defiant part of her refused to stay broken. And yet, healing doesn't always feel like progress. Sometimes it's waking up at 3 a.m. with a memory lodged in your chest like a thorn. Sometimes it's walking through a grocery store and passing his favorite cereal, and forgetting, for a moment, that he's no longer in your life. Sometimes it's holding a letter you never sent. Because yes, she had written him. She never meant to. Not really. It just happened one rainy afternoon, when the words poured out of her faster than the tears. She told him about the first snowfall, the new job, the nights that hurt, and the mornings that didn't. She didn't ask him to come back. She didn't beg for closure. She just wrote. Because sometimes you need to say things out loud, even if no one's listening. But she never mailed it. Instead, she folded the letter carefully, slipped it into the bottom drawer of her nightstand, and left it there. Unsent, unread, but written. A part of her knew Samuel wouldn't respond, that he probably wouldn't care, that maybe he never really did. But writing it, that was for her. And slowly, she began to realize something no one ever teaches you about heartbreak. Sometimes the closure you need is just the courage to walk away without needing answers. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. Nora was cleaning out a storage box in her closet. Old receipts, birthday cards, scraps of a life once shared. She found the key, the one to the old front door, the one Samuel never asked her to return. Her fingers paused on it, metal, cool against her palm. It felt like holding the ghost of something that used to be warm. For a moment her breath caught, and then she laughed. Not because it was funny, but because after all this time, after all the grief and growth, she was still holding the key to a place she no longer belonged. She stood up, walked outside, and drove. The highway stretched like a ribbon across the hills. The mountains rose in quiet witness. And after nearly 2 hours, she reached it. The house. It looked the same. Painted white. Red shutters. A swing on the porch that no longer swayed. She parked across the street, engine off. Just watching. There were no signs of life. No car, no lights, no movement. She didn't know if Samuel still lived there, or if someone new had taken their place. It didn't matter, because that house was no longer hers. And the man who once called her home was a stranger now. She stepped out of the car, crossed the road, and placed the key in the mailbox. No note, no message, just the key. And with it, every part of her that was still waiting to be remembered. She stood there for a moment, breathing in the crisp mountain air. The wind tugged at her coat. A single yellow leaf fluttered past her boot. And then she turned and walked away. No tears, no trembling, just peace. She didn't look back, because this time, she didn't need to. The winter came back to Montana like a familiar ache, the kind that settles into your bones without asking, that whispers in cold winds and stretches long into the evenings. Nora didn't mind it anymore. She had learned to move with the seasons, instead of fighting them. In her small apartment, everything had a place now. Her coffee, cups hung neatly by the stove. Her favorite wool blanket, the one she bought after the divorce, lay folded over the arm of the couch. And the bookshelf she built herself? Filled with stories of women who survived worse and still stood tall. She was alone. And yet, not lonely. It had taken her a long time to make peace with that truth. There would be no text message from Samuel, no call out of the blue, no handwritten letter with an apology, or an explanation, or a memory worth keeping. He was gone. Just like that. He had taken the house, the dog, the paintings they chose together on that trip to Seattle, even the cast-iron skillet she loved. He took it all, and he never looked back. Sometimes, she wondered what kind of man could erase an entire chapter of his life without hesitation, without kindness, without even a goodbye that meant something. But those questions, they didn't haunt her anymore, because she realized She would never get an answer that healed her. Some people walk away not because they stop loving you, but because they never knew how to love you in the first place. And even if they did, sometimes it's not enough. She didn't need his closure. She didn't want his pity. What she wanted was her life. Her own, simple, quiet, honest life. So she started planting things. Not just in pots by the window, but in her routine. A slow walk after dinner, a letter to her younger self every Sunday, a smile to her reflection in the mirror, even on days it felt like a lie. And then one day, something strange happened. She stopped thinking about him. Not entirely. But the edges of his memory began to blur. His voice faded. The scent of his cologne disappeared from the corners of her mind. It wasn't that she forgot him. It was that she remembered herself. The woman she was before the love story. Before the legal papers. Before the leaving. And that woman? She was still here. She had survived heartbreak. She had faced the cold silence of a man who left, and still stood in the warmth of her own resilience. She had cried. Yes. She had broken. Absolutely. But she had also rebuilt. Without revenge. Without bitterness. Just with breath. And time. And courage. And though she was alone, she was no longer lost. Years passed. Not all at once, but gradually, like snow melting off the edge of a roof in spring. One quiet drop at a time. Nora never remarried. She never moved back to that old neighborhood. She never heard from Samuel again. Not once. There were no birthday messages. No. I saw this and thought of you. No apologies wrapped in nostalgia. Just silence. At first, she thought that silence would crush her, but instead, it became her sanctuary. It gave her space to breathe, to rebuild, to sit with her own voice, not as an echo of someone else's love, but as the steady rhythm of her own heart, learning how to beat again. She spent her mornings writing in a leather-bound journal, her evenings drinking tea with the window open, even in winter, just to hear the world outside. She started painting. Nothing serious, just color on canvas. Blue when she missed something she couldn't name. Red when she felt brave. Green when she felt alive. Eventually, her apartment filled with these pieces of herself. Walls covered, in feelings she no longer needed words for. She found a new kind of love, not in someone else's eyes, but in the way her own hands tended to the life she chose. Love in the way she folded clean sheets. In the way she remembered to buy flowers for herself every Friday. In the way she no longer flinched at her own reflection. She'd go for long walks by Flathead Lake, tracing the shoreline like it was a memory she'd forgiven. Sometimes she'd see couples, holding hands, laughing, and she didn't ache anymore. She just hoped they were kind to each other. Because kindness, that's what she would have wanted most. Not the house, not the rings, not even the happily ever after. Just kindness. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, she stood by the water's edge, the sky painted in gold, the wind gentle on her skin, and she whispered something, not to Samuel, not to the past, but to herself. You did not lose everything. You kept the one thing that mattered most. You. She smiled. It wasn't a smile for anyone to see. It wasn't for photographs or proof or pride. It was for her. Only her. Because in the end, being at peace with yourself is louder than any goodbye that was never spoken. And if this story moved you or even made you think, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone. And this story is a work of fiction. All characters, names, and situations are entirely made up and are not based on real individuals. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental.